Thank you very much for visiting my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be discussing the Making a Murderer series, specifically the RAV4. The RAV4 that the state is reluctant to release to Steven Avery's attorney, Kathleen Zellner. But guess what I have? Yes, sirree, Bob. Got myself a genuine RAV4, 1998. Yeah, I know she drove a 1999 RAV4, but to be honest, they're almost identical. There were no model changes, so they're basically the same thing. So, without further ado, let's dive into that evidence and see what we discover.
Okay, so here I am inside the RAV4, and just to illustrate, I've marked on my finger the exact spot the cut was on Steven Avery. I've used a silver Sharpie so that you can see the contrast. And so let's assume that he came. This is actually my car keys. These are not an actual Toyota car keys, but this is just for illustration purposes. So it really doesn't matter, because as you can see, if he were to come in and put his key right here, it would go in. Would it go all the way down? No. And as you can see, his finger is folded back, folded all the way back, because when you're gripping a key, it folds in. So apart from the fact that the fingers are folding in and away from this area where the blood stain was found, once the key goes in, he's going to turn. And in that turning motion, the bloody finger would move away from this area. So just looking at the range of motion, in order for the blood to get onto this, his finger would have to come all the way down here, which doesn't really make any sense, because the key goes in first. Once the key goes in and he pushes it down, he's going to turn that, and then the fingers are going to move away. So it really doesn't make any sense at all that he would deposit blood right here. And in fact, we're going to look at another reason why there's no possibility of him depositing blood on that spot.
We've already established that Steven Avery had that cut before Teresa disappeared. Now, there are two possibilities. One, that he did something with all that he did. He reopened that cut and deposited some of that blood inside the vehicle, which raises a very interesting question. How did he manage not to, with all that he did, fire a gun, stabbing and all of that stuff, how did he manage not to leave blood anywhere else? That's a miracle. That's unbelievable. But I wanted to analyze something else from a medical perspective called the bleeding time, as we see here on Wikipedia. And here it explains that the bleeding time is a medical test done on someone to assess their platelets function. It involves making a patient bleed and timing how long it takes for them to stop bleeding. So basically, when you get a cut, your body realizes, hey, I'm losing blood somewhere, and it releases all these things that will allow it to clot and basically plug the leak, to put it, in layman terms. And it does it relatively quickly. And in doing that, it, prevents you from bleeding to death. So that's one of the problems we run into when we think of how he would have lost blood. Now, this part is very interesting. Just the second part. We want to focus just on the second part. It says, cessation of bleeding can be determined by blotting away the blood every several seconds until the site looks glassy. So what happens is that after a while, your body starts to patch that cut. You're no longer losing red blood cells. There is serum and there are other components of the blood, coagulating elements that will rush to that site and basically patch that opening. And after a while, it will, gain this yellow orangish look, as we saw in that picture of his cut that, was healing. So to think that he would, when a cut reopens, you do feel pain. So it's illogical to think that he would ignore that and then step inside the vehicle. And as we saw in the video that we just looked at, he would have deposited blood on the keys and somewhere else just because of the location of that cut. So that theory is basically out the window. So the second theory is that Well, guess what? He was so busy trying to cover up the crime scene that he didn't realize that he had a cut, and he just started dripping blood inside the vehicle. Two problems with that. First of all, these streaks of blood, do you see that they start at a spot and then they go up in a curve? And the heaviest part is right here, and then it goes up like a pattern as if someone were writing. Same thing over here. So if someone were actually bleeding and dripping blood, and he would have realized. Now, someone might say, well, he did heavy lifting with his hands, so he probably got cut and didn't realize it. Well, I can tell you, I've worked in technology for almost 30 years. My first job was with a telephone company. Well, my first technical job. And I've gotten quite a few cuts on my hands. And even building computers, later on, I've gotten a few cuts on the cases. And trust me, whether it's a fresh cut or a new cut, you feel it. And right away, you hold on to that cut. You might wrap tissue around it or duct tape, whatever, just to stop the bleeding. And once the bleeding stops, or even with the tape around it, you go back to work, but you still feel the pain. But it's something that grabs your attention, so it's not likely that he would have had blood dripping from his finger and continued working. The other problem is that we see the blood strokes going up. This is not what would happen if gravity were acting on a drop of blood. This is normally what would happen. Once blood falls onto a surface, then the forces of gravity will naturally pull it down and it will form a streak. We don't see that here. We don't see any streaking. So basically, this blood was put here under very suspicious circumstances. So as we see, it's virtually impossible for him to have left that blood stain there, because unlike this, which is reacting to the natural forces of gravity, the previous picture shows the streaks are in a pattern, which raises the question, what could leave a pattern like that? This is going to require some serious thought. What could leave a stain like that? Well, let's give it some thought, and if you have any ideas, any suggestions, just put in the comments below and keep it clean, okay? Keep it clean. No dirty tricks. We've had enough of that. Bye.